Morning, afternoon, and evening to all attendees wherever you are in the world. Thank you for listening to this briefing. My briefing serves two purposes. Firstly, to highlight the attack on masculinity and the damage this is doing to boys. And secondly, to counter this attack by spreading the word on my series of illustrated kids' books that aim to improve our boys' self-esteem, sense of male identity, and overall well-being by getting them while they're young. Equally, these books provide a welcome opportunity and avenue for fathers and sons to bond, while the boy learns to read and about masculinity in general. I'm going to address this form using the who, what, when, where, why, and how format, but not in that order. I'll start with the why, because it addresses the problems and needs, and then go on from there, talking about the Brilliant Bob series of kids' books. First, the why. It's no secret that feminists, leftists, in modern day society has pushed for and insisted on the feminization of nearly every institution you care to mention, including the government, the military, and the public and private spaces. Sadly, this insistence on feminizing and emasculating males even comes out of many good women, either because they don't understand male behavior and men, or they simply prefer female ways. Take, for instance, the workplace. Comically, HR is now informally known as HER. It's not a controversial statement to say that most places have become feeling-centered and so gynocentric in practice that men are permanently on guard and anxious. Me Too, sexual harassment policies and laws, and woke mentality have not only made most places anti-male, but pro-female. Sadly, it doesn't just affect grown men anymore. It's literally all males, and it's their mission to get at the boys while they're young. And apparently, the younger, the better. Suddenly, I find I'm wrong if I say that it starts in school. Recently, it's become an omnipresent, multifaceted, multimedia, and pernicious attack on boys and masculinity. Having said that, let's start with the education system. It's correct to say that schools are highly feminized environments where elementary schools are staffed with female teachers at a rate of 90%, to include the administrators. And it doesn't get much better as kids progress through the system. In the processes and methods the schools utilize and endorse, it's obvious most schools favor girls and punish boys, even given lower grades to boys just because they're male. See the BBC Teachers Give Higher Marks to Girls, 5 March 2015 article, the UN's and OECD reports. When it comes to teachers marking results, the OECD study says there's a consistent pattern of girls' work being marked up. Yes, it's well documented that teachers favor girls as model students who are agreeable and sit still, and they reward them, and they punish boy-style, energetic, rambunctious behavior. Dare a boy question what's being taught, not raise his hand to speak, or not sit still. Even worse, over the decades, schools have become much more sedentary, feeling-centered, competition-free, risk-averse, collaborative, protective, less stoic, and less aggressive places where talking and crying are promoted. They truly have become factories of rote where total obedience and compliance is required. Reading and writing lessons are more about collaborative writing groups, creative self-expression, and journaling, which for many boys is torture and embarrassing to say the least. And it doesn't end in the classroom. There's no more cops and robbers or superhero imitation in games, and tag, kickball, and dodgeball are banned for safety reasons. It's reality and practice that boys' imaginations and their likes and interests have been criminalized. Is it really any wonder that the number of boys who said they didn't like school increased 70% plus since 1980? Consequently, it wouldn't be shocking to know that boys are punished, suspended, and expelled at 8 times the rate as girls, and they drop out of school twice as often and are sent to youth institutions at 9 times the rate of girls. and boys are supposedly diagnosed with ADHD at 6 times the rate of girls. In practice, boys are punished for being boys, are expected to behave and learn like girls, and are not taught in a way that is anywhere near appropriate to the way boys learn best. Going back to teachers, Mortensen and Whitmore report on the observations that the gender of the teacher is a significant factor driving the boy crisis. And it's not just the number of female teachers, but the fact that, quote, today's female teachers are schooled in a feminist dogma that leaves them resistant to the idea that boys need to be taught in different ways, unquote. They feminize boys, forcing active, healthy, and unnaturally rambunctious boys to conform to a regime of obedience, pathologizing what is simply normal for boys, as Michael Gurian argues in The Wonder of Boys. Other scholars argue that the paucity of male teachers is indicative of a larger problem of the feminization of schools. Female teachers and a feminized curriculum all serve to alienate male students. Thus, boys don't get on at school nearly as well as girls. They're not as engaged and they underperform. It's well documented that boys get 70% of the D's and F's and that 70% of the valedictorians are girls. And it continues over time. Today, females outnumber students and graduates at university with a 61 to 39% split, girls over boys. And consequently, it would seem to fit that boys' IQs have dropped 15 points since the 1980s. It's akin to the use it or lose it theorem. But to hear the so-called experts, it's that boys are just dumber than girls. Just this summer, The Independent, a UK paper, shamelessly published an article that headlined, GCSE results show girls are simply smarter than boys. Says education expert. It subtitles with a quote, why then does it seem so difficult to accept that females are cleverer? Question mark. Asked Professor Alan Smithers. Tellingly, within the article, he strangely noted that although there was little difference between the sexes in the old O-level exams, girls leapt ahead in GCSE, which was a new type of exam. This was explained as being down to the new modular structure of the GCSEs, and not that girls work and perform better this way, as opposed to, say, comprehensive exams. This goes to exactly what many of us are saying, that schools and the way schools teach have been feminized and catered to the way girls learn, not boys. It doesn't occur to these experts or the media that this just might be the case. Regressing slightly back to early education, Dr. Farrell reports that worldwide, boys are 50% more likely than girls to fail to meet basic proficiency in reading, math, and science. It would surprise no one that the UN finds that reading is the skill that best predicts future success worldwide. Thus, if boys aren't reading, how can they improve and compete? To help our boys succeed, we must get them to read. But sadly, poor reading skills aren't the only major problem boys are dealing with. The denigration of males and masculinity is a serious issue today. Neologisms like manspreading, mansplaining, and manflu are commonplace, and now toxic masculinity is so widely accepted as fact that even politicians in Congress and Parliament have taken to using it as support to creating and changing laws to benefit women and harm men, notably female politicians. And bodies such as the UN, Women's Aid, the APA, and companies like Gillette routinely denigrate masculinity. Incredibly, the APA's guidelines on boys and men's mental health treatment has made many traditionally masculine traits an actual pathology. This against the backdrop that saw feminists erase hysteria from medical books. To quantify things to some degree, Dr. Jim McNamara of Australia wrote a thesis considering over 2,000 media articles and found that 69% were negative to men. Men were reported as villains, aggressors, and perverts, and this is not harmless. Essentially, this denies boys role models, which is exacerbated by fatherlessness and the dearth of male teachers in schools. McNamara goes on to warn that, quote, the negative stereotyping of men and male identity can contribute to significant problems in society. In the long run, such negative portrayals of men, lowering self-esteem in boys and loss of identity could lead to negative social and financial costs, namely in male health issues, rising suicides, and family disintegration, unquote. And it gets more sinister still. It's not only a relentless attack on males and masculinity, but also a widespread effort to censor and silence those who wish to fight the very harmful narrative. One recent internationally talked about case centers around a male teacher at Eton. Mr. William Nolan, an obviously masculine and muscular teacher at Eton, who by all accounts was well liked and respected by the boys at the school, was fired for attempting to create, as a formal lesson, a video named The Patriarchy Paradox that would facilitate and allow the teenage boys to debate the patriarchy and masculinity and the current attacks on it in a very educational and monitored setting. For those that aren't familiar, debate is part and parcel at Eton. Much to Mr. Nolan's dismay and shock, he was not only not allowed to show the video in the school and did not, but Eton's leadership also mandated that he take it off his private YouTube channel, Nolan Knows, or else, they warned, even though it never mentioned or connected Eton with it. Mr. Nolan did not take it down, and he was not only fired, but was reported to the educational powers to ban him from teaching altogether. Can you imagine? Luckily, he was cleared this past August. Of note, this same school of future kings and prime ministers routinely allows feminists like Laura Bates, known for the Everyday Sexism Project, who appear to hate men and preach oppression of women by men, to speak to the boys. Eton even has a feminism society in its school, which, remember, is an all-boys school. The censorship and silencing of men is so blatant and hypocritical that it's clear that it's okay to teach radical feminism, woke concepts, critical race theory, and Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, but we're not allowed to counter the patriarchy or toxic masculinity theories, not even at Eton. One more example of the creep that leads to the free-for-all bashing of males happened in late March 2021 in Australia. You no doubt would have heard about the school that made all the boys stand up and apologize to the girls in the school assembly. Yes, the young boys at Brouwer College, Warrnambool, Victoria, Australia, were told to stand up in assembly as a symbolic gesture of apology for the behavior of their gender that have hurt or offended girls and women, unquote. One 12-year-old boy in attendance named Levi said he felt, quote, a bit under pressure to stand up, and if I didn't, then I felt like a bad person, unquote. This young boy's statement speaks to the power and damage of such shaming and guilt tripping on our young boys. And as Ms. Daniels, one parent of one of the boys made to apologize, told the media, quote, what they have made the boys do, they have labeled them and categorized them all into the same category as a perpetrator and a rapist, when these boys have done absolutely nothing wrong, unquote. I think it's clear that blaming, shaming, and bashing males is very damaging because it lowers the self-esteem and the worth of boys and males. I think so. Mr. Nolan says so publicly and links it with suicide, and Dr. McNamara and others also think so. Another recent example of support came from Hannah Gowles, a journalist in London, interview with Dave Rubin for Lotus Eaters in August 21. You mentioned the right, she says, and that Jordan Peterson said that the extreme of the left will wake the right's demons, right wing's demons. To which Rubin replied, quote, "He's right. If you're a young 16-year-old white kid and you're constantly being told that you're a racist, you're privileged, meanwhile you live in a trailer, your mom's addicted to opioids, you're told you're the worst thing in the world, you know you're going to have trouble getting a job because they're going to have to give it to a quote unquote oppressed minority instead, well, you might start becoming a racist." Well, it doesn't mean becoming a racist is the right thing to do, but people turn to bad ideas in bad times, and you can understand why it would happen, unquote. Essentially, we all know you can beat the devil into a person, and similarly, we all know that you can just as surely deflate a person. In my opinion, it's a case of needing more masculinity, building pride in it, celebrating it, and teaching it, not having less of it. Which reminds me of a personal story from childhood and many years as a young man finding his way. I was a very competitive guy from early on. I wanted to win at pretty much everything, and I wanted to be the best if I could. I can't tell you the number of times girls and young women asked me why I was so competitive. And it wasn't said so much as a question. It was more a put down, as if there was something wrong with me. Over the years, it did take its toll, and I felt an inner doubt, as if there was indeed something wrong with me. Of course, now I know why males compete. It's nature's way for women to see at a glance which men are the most desirable, and not always as a measure of what men like or necessarily want, but what women want and desire. Males compete for females. It is what it is. And let's not forget that it's the woman or the women who choose their mates for reproduction. Said another way, unemployed poor men are the least likely to marry. Wealthy men the most likely to marry. Moving on, it must also be said that to cause harm, things don't have to be targeted at boys or be openly aggressive toward males. Slogans like "the future is female" are actually harmful on their own when considered broadly and said repeatedly in public. A case in point comes from the editor of my Brilliant Bob books. She's the mother of 2 young boys, and she told me about a day when they went shopping for clothes last year. The older boy of 10 saw a t-shirt with the slogan, "The future is female," hanging on a rack in the store, and said, quote, "But Mom, I'm here. Do they want me gone? Where am I going?" Unquote. The boy didn't fully understand what was being said or why, but he felt the impact and gist of what it could be or lead to under some regimes. Instinctively, my editor's son was hurt, and it's evident based on his reply that this is and can easily be a very hurtful statement to those that are not female. And it continues. On 14 June this year, the long-esteemed AMA decided to join the woke brigade and is pushing to delete the binary choices of male and female from birth certificates, claiming it can lead to discrimination and an unnecessary burden on the individual later in life. This old man of 57 just can't believe this announcement. What may seem kind to a very small group of people may do untold damage to boys' mental health and masculinity in general. I could, of course, address the impact on young girls too, but since I'm talking about boys, I'll stick with boys in the subject of harm to boys. Needless to say, it's my strong belief that this potential AMA practice will be used to make it wrong and even a crime to teach and preach masculinity in males. At the very least, it will become taboo. And now we turn to another problem that's being promoted, even though it's eating away at society and harming our boys in so many well-documented ways. Fatherlessness. It's a huge topic, and Dr. Warren Farrell and others cover it and its impact on boys in society in depth. It's correlated with nearly every measure of failure and suffering related to boys and girls and their lives as men. In fact, well, for the boys, what I'm talking about. In fact, it is causal. Some specifics are covered below, where I address how boys are hurting. But let's just say here that it relates to education, gangs, drugs, alcohol, crime, being a victim of crime, rape, being a victim of rape, incarceration, and murder. As we know, boys eventually grow into men, and damaged and battered boys who are left to feel deflated and of low worth and self-esteem will not prosper, but will suffer and be a drain to society and others. As Dr. Farrell often says in his talks, boys who hurt us, and some will harm themselves through risky activities and habits, abusing alcohol and drugs, and large numbers will consider suicide. Again, Dr. Farrell sums it up so accurately and succinctly saying, worth less, men considered themselves as worthless. Is it surprising that male suicide continues to rise and is so high? To conclude this section, feminism and woke ideology are colluding to make life for males very uncomfortable at best and a driver of suicide at worst, with much suffering in between. It's gone too far and it must be countered now. Thus, I'm countering the very damaging narrative and male bashing with messages that celebrate masculinity by showing how helpful it can be to a young boy's life. As Christina Hoff Sommers says in her book, The War Against Boys, quote, genuine self-esteem comes with pride in achievement, which is the fruit of disciplined effort, unquote. Reading, discipline, good habits, and morals will see boys right in their lives, and Brilliant Bob is here to help with all these things. Excuse me. So how are boys hurting? In North America and Europe, there are three dimensions to the current boy crisis, says Dr. Michael Kimmel: attendance, achievement, and behavior. And Dr. Farrell explains it as a crisis of education, mental health, fathering, and purpose. That is, dad deprivation combined with a lack of purpose in life. Consequently, fewer and fewer males attend higher education, and it keeps getting lower. 2, boys account for about 2/3 of all students receiving special education services. 3, boys are 6 times more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD. 4, boys aged 16 to 24 are more likely to be unemployed and incarcerated. US jail and prison population increased more than 700% between 1973 and 2013, and 93% are males and disproportionately young. 5, boys are diagnosed as emotionally disturbed and commit suicide 4 times more often than girls. 6, suicides are up. Before puberty, it's pretty much equal for boys and girls. Between 10 and 14, it's nearly 2 times for boys. Between 15 and 19, it's 4 times for boys. Between 20 and 24, it's 5 to 6 times in boys. Suicide now takes more lives than war, murder, and natural disasters combined. 7, young men are far less prepared than young women to succeed in the current knowledge-based and service economy, are more likely to suffer from substantial declines in real income, and are far more vulnerable to unemployment in times of economic recession. What makes it a crisis is the loss of traditional male employment. Jobs have gone from muscle to mental, to services and care, and of course, males fill the dangerous jobs. 92% of job deaths are male. Over the last 40 years, the median annual earnings of a boy with just a high school diploma dropped 26%. 8, young men between 25 and 31 are 66% more likely than their female counterparts to be living with their parents. 9, fatherlessness. In the UK and US, 1/3 of kids grow up in fatherless homes. In reality, 78% of kids have little to no contact with their fathers. 20% have zero contact, 22% see them once a week, and 29% see their fathers less than 4 times per month. 10, divorce and single moms. Half of kids born to mothers under 30 were outside marriage. Nearly half of marriages fail, and as at at a low that goes back to the late 1800s, and cohabiting couples break up 5 times the rate of married couples. Children born out of wedlock and living with single mothers is high in most Western countries, and it keeps increasing. In the US, it's 40%. In the EU, it's 43%, with 8 countries over 50%. In the UK, it's 48%, and in France, it's 60%. Shockingly, it's even worse for people of color, rising to 75% plus for Black people. Which brings us to the what. Just what are the Brilliant Bob books? Well, they're a series and currently a set of 7 books for boys on traits linked to masculinity as displayed and learned about by Brilliant Bob, the protagonist. The 7 books include Brilliant Bob is Brave, Brilliant Bob is Competitive, Brilliant Bob is Strong, Brilliant Bob is Curious, Brilliant Bob Takes a Risk, Brilliant Bob is Stoic, and Brilliant Bob is Persistent. As it's a series of books, Book 1 should be read first, being the birth and introduction of Brilliant Bob. Book 2 should be read next because it's where Bob meets his 3 special friends: Dazzling Dave, who wants to throw things the furthest, Genuine George, who wants to be the fastest and smartest, and Superboy Sam, who wants to be the best all-around athlete. From Book 3 onward, it's all about fun and adventures that teach and celebrate traits, normally and traditionally associated with masculinity. Incidentally, Brilliant Bob wants to be the strongest. Essentially, the books are exciting, everyday adventures for boys that explore the usefulness and utility of masculine traits in life. The storyline for each book is as follows. In Brilliant Bob is Brave, Bob used to be afraid, but now he wants to learn to fight the fears that are holding him back. Bob vows to be brave. Join Brilliant Bob as he learns to master his fear of the dark, the dentist, certain foods, and other kids so that he can live a full and happy life. In Brilliant Bob is Strong, Brilliant Bob and his 3 best friends join their school soccer team, football in Europe. To help their team win games, the boys know they'll have to be skilled and strong, which means eating healthy food, getting enough sleep, and putting in a lot of hard work. Will their strength help their team win the state title against last year's champions? In Brilliant Bob is Competitive. Bob feels a burning natural desire to compete and be the best at something, and he's not alone. Join Brilliant Bob and his 3 best friends as the boys strive to be the strongest, the fastest, and smartest, the best overall athlete, and the boy who throws things the farthest. In Brilliant Bob is Curious, it's Brilliant Bob's lucky day. He finds an old discarded bike. It needs some elbow grease, but then it will be as good as new. Curiosity gets the best of Bob, and he takes it apart to understand it. Can Bob rebuild it and make it even better? Join Bob as he discovers and receives an education from hands-on learning. In Brilliant Bob Takes a Risk, Brilliant Bob has to face his fear of springboard diving if he wants to make his school's team. Join Brilliant Bob as he learns through training and practice that life is full of risks, but they aren't always as scary as they seem. Bob learns that taking and managing risks can bring excitement, confidence, and success. In Brilliant Bob is Stoic, Brilliant Bob's dad takes Bob and his 3 best friends camping. Find out what happens when they get lost on their way to the river to fish for their dinner, with a thunderstorm brewing. There's no time for excessive emotion or panic. To find their way and save the camping trip, the boys must learn to be stoic. In Brilliant Bob is Persistent, Brilliant Bob wants to learn how to ride an amazing wheelie on his bike, just like another boy he saw. Bob also needs to master his times tables for math class, all 10 of them. Will Bob and his friends meet their goals? They'll find out through practice and hard work. It's time to be persistent. The Brilliant Bob books will teach young boys to appreciate positive morals and traits that will add greatly to their life journeys. Male role models such as fathers and grandfathers, older brothers, or teachers are encouraged to read these books to their young boys in their lives, reinforcing the positive impact these traits have had on their masculinity. Among other things, young boys will learn about the following positive attributes: adaptability and flexibility, bonding and cohesion, bravery and courage, confidence, discipline and delayed gratification, fairness and empathy, importance of health and well-being, losing graciously and celebrating others' success, optimism, persistence and tenacity, reliability, responsibility to self and others, sense of identity as a male, self-awareness, self-respect, and self-esteem, stoicism, teamwork, and the willingness to take calculated risks. Okay, so big deal. I wrote some kids' books. Just how do books address all the serious problems mentioned above? Excuse me. Like most things, one step and one item at a time, by addressing the 3 to 4 major problems Dr. Farrell and Dr. Kimmel have painstakingly identified over the years. The Brilliant Bob series and main character Bob answers the 3 major issues that are harming our young boys today. Firstly, reading, which relates heavily to education. Secondly, fatherlessness. And thirdly, the pernicious and unrelenting attack on masculinity in males that only serves to harm males' self-esteem and well-being. I wrote the Brilliant Bob series to give boys some books they'll relate to and enjoy reading, to improve their reading and general education, to give them the opportunity to read and bond with any important male figures they have in their lives, hopefully their dad, to inspire and motivate them, improve their sense of male identity, self-esteem, and well-being, and lastly, to instill morality in combination with masculinity. From this premise, I've coined the phrase, morality makes masculinity magical. So who are these books for? These books are written for boys aged 2 and up, where dad or a male of significance reads the books to the boy. Specifically, they're for boys aged 4 to 8 to learn how to read or to practice their reading skills and to learn about masculinity and how it benefits males and society at large. Getting to the boys while they're young and vulnerable has the best chance of sinking in before they hear other damaging narratives elsewhere. And where can you get these books? Well, the usual. All 7 books are available and competitively priced online in either paperback at $9.99 or hardcover at $18.99 on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Waterstones, to name a few, and on the Brilliant Bob website at www.brilliantbobkidbooks.com. They're also listed on most online and common retail outlets using the the author's name, the book title, and ISBN, which you can get from Bob's website or Amazon. I'm also working to get these books into schools and libraries, but this will take much time and a collective effort. It's no easy task, as you'd imagine, especially given the unique genre in today's woke mentality. Hence, it would be most helpful if the people who believe in Bob's message and need for the books would request its listing with Renaissance, a reading platform in the US and some European countries, and on any other forums they know about. It would be great if parents would mention it to their kids' schools and local libraries and any other forums where kids might get together to read. Finally, it would help if people spread the word on social media such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, on blogs, and to organizations that do related work, and on any podcast they might talk on or that they could refer the podcast host to. When? These books, Brilliant Bob Was Brave, the first, was officially released late January 21. The remaining 6 were released late February 21, but not properly published until mid-March 21. So this year and next is the time to hit it hard. In summary, masculinity and males are under attack from many angles There are numerous indicators that tell us the damage from this has been with us for decades and that it will get even worse. Society is failing most boys in education and especially regarding their reading and writing skills, and it's squashing what it is to be and learn as a boy. Society is failing most boys in the home and domestic setting through policies and support that enables single motherhood and denies kids meaningful contact with their fathers. And society is denying most boys a bright and healthy future by ignoring their mental health and well-being, gainful employment, and a sense of achievement and purpose, in turn increasing the chances and numbers of boys who will suffer from addictions, a failure to launch, and depression and suicide. Worse still, no matter the measure of failure or suffering that clearly affects boys and men, society refuses to address problems and doubles down on its attack on masculinity and males. It's masculinity itself that is toxic and harmful, they say, not the clear lack of it and push to emasculate males, the younger the better. To quote the Manic Street Preachers band, #1 song's lyrics, and if you tolerate this, then your children will be next. It speaks to rising up against fascism under Franco, while I'm referring to it in regards to today's fascism that prioritizes the female sex over the male individual, apparently at any cost. I'm calling it fascism rather than sexism because it exists through the nation's systems and structures, and it appears part of the culture in the Western world. Closer to home, it's also men's deference to women, his ability to ignore and tolerate much and just get on with things, and his willingness to not say what needed to be said over many years that has fueled the beast and the insatiable feminist ability to do unpredictable harm. Rather than fight a fair fight and see men as considerate and concerned, women have interpreted men's deference and appeasement as weakness and guilt, and as a result have now decided to take the fight to our young boys. Well, the line in the sand has been drawn for me. I'm fighting back with important messages for boys in the form of kids' books on masculinity. Teaching boys to read and enjoy reading, bonding with dad, and building a boy's self-esteem and sense of male identity will help combat the multi-pronged attack on males. That certainly will help. Thus, I hope you'll draw the line in the sand with me and say enough is enough. For the sake of our boys, we won't tolerate this, and we will speak up and fight back on their behalf. It starts with reading, and Brilliant Bob is as great a place as any other to start our personal, social, and political crusade to save our sons and the male as a whole. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you in advance for your future support. Good night and goodbye.